Have you ever met someone who walks into a room and doesn't say much, but their silence says everything? They're not cold, not rude, not shy, just distant. But not the kind of distance that pushes people away on purpose. It's the kind of distance that says, I've been hurt, and I haven't forgotten. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace. It comes from pain. It's the quiet of someone who's been through too much for too long. And they've learned that the more you speak, the more you can be misunderstood. That the more you open up, the more chances people have to walk away. So they sit quietly, not to be mysterious, but to be safe. Carl Jung saw it clearly. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most people don't realize silence can be a survival response, because once love has been mishandled, once trust has been shattered, the body remembers, and the soul pulls back. These people don't ask to be understood, but they still hope someone might try. They don't demand connection, but they feel the ache of its absence in every room. Others will call them serious, closed off, too much. But those words say more about those speaking them than the person they're speaking about. Because this silence, it's not emptiness, it's experience. It's what happens when life has taught you that speaking too soon or trusting too easily comes with a cost. You've probably seen it before, maybe even in the mirror. That calm face, that easy smile, the I'm fine that comes too quickly, too perfectly. It's not fake, it's not a lie, it's survival. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to move through the world, to be accepted, to avoid rejection, to function, even when everything inside is falling apart. And for people who have suffered too much, that mask isn't optional, it's armor. Because there was a time when showing your real self came with consequences. Maybe you were too sensitive, too emotional, too intense, and someone made you feel like that was wrong. So you adapted. You learned how to perform safety, how to make others comfortable, even if it cost you your truth. Now people say you're strong. They admire your control, your composure, your ability to hold it all together. But they don't see the cost. They don't know how much pain that mask has carried, or how heavy it becomes when you wear it for too long, because eventually you forget where the mask ends and where you begin. You smile when you're exhausted. You say yes when you mean no. You become who the world needs you to be and lose who you really are. Jung warned of this. The danger isn't in wearing the mask. It's in mistaking it for your face. People say, you're too serious. You overthink everything. You should loosen up. But they don't understand what it took for you to become this way. They didn't see what happened the last time you let your guard down. The last time you gave someone the unfiltered version of yourself, and they used it against you. So you learned to pause, to measure, to observe before speaking. You learn to protect yourself before pleasing anyone else. It's not that you feel everything. But now you don't always show it, because being open once meant getting hurt. And now your nervous system doesn't just remember, it reacts. Before your mind even catches up, your body already knows what danger feels like. A tone of voice, a missed call, a slight change in rhythm. To the outside world you look distant, but inside you're scanning. Not for drama, for safety. Carl Jung understood this. He said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And the more you become aware, the more you feel the weight of what once went unnoticed. You see patterns others miss. You pick up on what isn't being said. And it makes connection complicated, because you can't unsee what your pain taught you to notice. So no, you're not cold. You're cautious. Not because you want to be, but because you've had to be. And the deeper question isn't, why are you like this? It's, what did you survive that made caution feel safer than closeness? Because what some call too much was actually your way of staying alive. Most people think pain fades with time, but you know better. Because even when the wound isn't bleeding, it still aches. Not always in ways you can point to, but in the way you pull back when someone gets too close, in the way you overanalyze a pause in a conversation, in the way your stomach tightens when a message goes unanswered for just a little too long. You're not being dramatic. You're not needy. You're responding to what your body remembers. Carl Jung called this a complex, a buried emotional knot, hidden in the unconscious, quietly shaping your reactions. It's not the current moment that hurts. It's the echo, the resemblance, the way this situation feels like something you thought you left behind. You don't choose the panic. It arrives. Before you have time to think. Before you can remind yourself that you're safe. Someone says something in just the wrong tone. Someone pulls away just slightly. And suddenly, you're not in this moment anymore. You're in that one, the one you never fully healed from. You freeze. You over-explain. You shut down. Not because you want to, because your system is still trying to protect you. Most people won't see it. They'll think you're overreacting. They'll think you're difficult. But what they're actually witnessing is a survival response wrapped in silence. And the truth is, you've probably judged yourself too. Told yourself to get over it. To stop being sensitive. But that pain isn't broken. It's intelligent. It's trying to show you what still lives inside you. So maybe the question isn't, what's wrong with me? Maybe it's, what am I still carrying that hasn't been held with care? Because if pain keeps coming back, it's not trying to haunt you. It's trying to be heard. And it won't stop until you finally turn around and listen. When someone has suffered deeply, their behavior isn't random. It's patterned, protective, precise. And if you don't understand where it comes from, it's easy to misread it. You might see withdrawal as rudeness, guardedness as pride, overthinking as drama. But Carl Jung offered something most people still don't: language. He said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." In other words, we are shaped by what we've endured. And no two journeys carve the soul the same way. The person who checks in too much isn't clingy, they've just been abandoned before without warning. The one who never asks for help? They probably grew up learning no one would come. The one who always gives but never takes? That's not generosity. That's a fear of being a burden. When you start to see these behaviors as stories, not flaws, everything changes. Jung believed that to witness another person's pain without trying to fix, judge, or escape it is one of the most sacred acts. You step into a place few are allowed, a place built from silence, scars, and survival. It's not a place for assumptions. It's not a place for advice. It's a place for reverence. Because when you've carried pain for years, the greatest kindness isn't someone telling you to let go. It's someone simply standing beside you, saying, "I see how heavy it's been." So the next time someone pulls away, before you label them cold or distant, pause. Because you might be standing at the edge of something sacred, not broken, not damaged, but a soul, still learning how to feel safe in a world that didn't hold them gently the first time. There are people who give love like it's a second language. They're always checking in, always listening, always helping, and everyone calls them strong, compassionate, selfless. But underneath that strength is exhaustion. Because not all giving comes from abundance. Some of it comes from fear. The fear that if they stop fixing everyone else, they might have to face what's broken in themselves. Carl Jung understood this too. He taught that what we avoid in ourselves, we often try to save in others. It feels noble, but it's a mask. Some people become the healer, not because they're healed, but because healing others feels safer than being seen. They pour themselves into people who never pour back. They solve everyone's chaos, while quietly drowning in their own. And when you tell them, "You're amazing. How do you do it all?" they smile, because they don't know how to answer without revealing the truth. They're tired, but they don't know how to stop. They confuse love with usefulness. They stay in relationships long past the breaking point, afraid that if they stop giving, they'll stop being needed. And if they're not needed, they'll be left behind. They're praised for their strength, but inside, they are rarely held. And here's the cruel irony. The world celebrates their kindness, but rarely asks if they're okay. So if you've ever found yourself giving to everyone but yourself, if you've ever stayed silent because someone else needed the space, if you've ever swallowed your own pain just to be the one who holds it together, you're not weak, you're not broken, but maybe you're due for the love you keep trying to give. And the real question becomes, what happens when the strong one finally lets go of the role? When the fixer stops fixing and starts healing? Some people walk alone. They don't complain. They don't ask for help. They carry everything in silence. And most people think that's a choice. But it's not always strength. Sometimes it's adaptation. Because when you've reached out before and no one came, you stop reaching. When your needs were too much for others, you stop needing altogether. And what begins as survival slowly hardens into identity. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." And often, the hyper-independent adult is still carrying a story that began in childhood, a story where no one was emotionally available, where connection felt dangerous, where asking for support meant being ignored, dismissed, or punished. So they became the reliable one, the capable one, the one who never asks, never needs, never falters. But behind all that competence is someone who's still wondering what it would feel like to be able to fall apart and not be left. Others think they're proud, distant, untouchable, but really they've just lived enough disappointment to know depending on others can sometimes hurt more than going it alone. And it's not just independence, it's disappearance. They vanish emotionally in the middle of conversations. They shut down when things get too close. They smile while fading away. You talk to them, but you can't reach them. Their body is present, but their spirit has already left the room. It's not because they don't care, it's because somewhere along the line, they learned. To be visible is to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable is to be at risk. But even lone wolves feel the ache of not being known. And sometimes, the most distant person in your life is the one hoping you'll see past the silence and ask, "Are you still in there?" Because the ones who disappear are often the ones who want to be found the most. You don't always remember what happened, but your body does. That tightening in your chest when someone raises their voice, the way your stomach drops when someone pulls away, the sudden tension in your shoulders when a message is left unanswered. No one else sees it, but your nervous system is alert, scanning, watching, bracing. Because when you've suffered too much, your body stops waiting for explanation. It prepares for impact. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious never forgets, and the body, as part of that unconscious, speaks in sensations long before the mind finds the words. You might say, "I'm just being cautious." But what you really mean is, last time, this feeling came right before everything fell apart. Your instincts are not paranoia. They are memory, raw, unfiltered, and often too fast to catch with thought alone. So you test without meaning to. You pull back just slightly. You stay quiet a little longer. You delay your response just to see, will they reach out? Will they notice? Because your body is asking a question that your voice doesn't dare. Am I safe here? And sometimes you say nothing. But everything inside you is screaming. That's not weakness. That's experience. Your intuition has been sharpened in the fire of disappointment. And while others walk blindly into connection, you move carefully. Not because you enjoy it, but because your system has learned what it costs to ignore the signs. You feel the energy behind words, the tension behind a smile, the pause that shouldn't be there. You hear what isn't said, and it's exhausting, being this aware, but it's also what kept you alive. Still, survival isn't the same as peace. And the real shift begins when you ask, can I learn to listen to my body without letting it dictate every outcome? Can I honor what it remembers without letting it decide what happens next? For most people, love feels like something warm, something soft, a place to rest. But for someone who's suffered too much, love stops feeling like a dream and starts feeling like a test. You don't fall. You scan, you watch. Not because you're suspicious, but because you've learned what happens when you trust too soon. You don't lead with your heart. You lead with your questions. Who are you when things get hard? Do your words match your energy? What happens when I get quiet? Will you notice? Carl Jung taught that what's unresolved inside of us shows up in our relationships. And when love has been the place where you've been most hurt, it becomes the hardest place to relax. So when someone new enters your life, you don't open your arms. You narrow your eyes. You listen for inconsistencies. You test the ground before you step forward. Not because you want to leave, but because you need to know it's safe to stay. You notice their tone when they say they're fine. You track how the story shifts each time they tell it. You feel the subtle gaps between their affection and their follow-through. You don't accuse, but you do remember. Because the last time you ignored those gaps, you paid for it. Others might say you're guarded, but they don't see the ghosts behind your caution. You've been blindsided before, and the soul never forgets what it had to recover from. So you carry your past like armor. And every time someone says, "You're being too careful," you think, "Careful is what kept me breathing." Still, beneath the caution, there's longing. And the question that echoes quietly always is, can I trust this one? Or will this be the next person who teaches me not to? You don't come right out and say it. You don't ask, will you hurt me? Will you leave if I stop being easy to love? Can you hold space for the parts of me I've learned to hide? Instead, you observe. You ask small things, not to trap them, but to feel them. You go quiet for a moment to see if they lean in or drift away. You let the silence stretch just long enough to hear their response, not just their words, because people can say anything, but energy doesn't lie, and you've learned to listen to the things that don't speak. Will they check in when you pull back? Will they hold presence when you're not performing your smile? Will they stay when you stop making it easy? Carl Jung believed that our unconscious doesn't just drive our behavior. It seeks to confirm our deepest beliefs. So if you've been abandoned, you test whether abandonment is coming. If you've been lied to, you look for gaps in the truth before they grow. If you've been used, you wait to see if they want you, or what you do for them. But you don't do this out of malice. You do it because you've had to rebuild yourself in silence before. And now, even the softest cracks feel like warning signs. Even small inconsistencies can feel like betrayal in disguise. You notice when their tone changes. You hear when their answers get shorter. You feel the shift, even when they swear everything is fine. And it hurts. Not because you want to catch them doing something wrong, but because you so badly want to believe they won't. Still, the moment something doesn't line up, a piece of you begins to close. Quietly, internally, permanently. Because after suffering too much, you don't confront first, you withdraw first, not to punish, but to protect. And behind every test you give is the same silent plea. Please just be real. Please don't make me survive you too. Most people run from pain. They bury it, ignore it, explain it away. But Carl Jung knew better. He said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And you know this too, because your pain didn't disappear. It changed form. It became your silence, your hesitation, your overthinking, your hyper-awareness of every shift in mood, every pause, every inconsistency. Pain that isn't seen becomes behavior. Pain that isn't felt becomes fear. Pain that isn't processed becomes protection. But here's the part no one tells you. Your pain doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be respected. It wants to be heard, not rushed. Held, not managed. Witnessed, not solved. It's not asking you to bleed again. It's asking you to finally stop pretending you didn't. When we say someone is too much, we're often standing in the presence of someone who has carried far too much alone. And when you've done that for long enough, you stop asking for help. Not because you don't need it, but because you've learned what happens when no one comes. Still, there's another way. It begins not with trying to be stronger, but with asking a new kind of question. What am I still carrying? What part of me is still trying to protect something I haven't looked at? Because your wounds aren't weakness, they're maps. And the moment you stop running from them, they stop chasing you. You don't need to erase what's happened, you need to understand it. And once you do, the story you've been living in begins to change. Not by force, but by truth. So maybe it's time to stop judging your reactions and start listening to what they're trying to say. Somewhere along the line, you were taught to hide the parts that didn't look pretty. The anger, the fear, the confusion, the longing. So you tucked them away, smiled instead, kept things light, made yourself easier to be around. But Carl Jung warned of this. He said that the parts of ourselves we disown don't vanish. They slip into the shadow. And the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits. It shows up in moments you least expect, in the overreaction, in the withdrawal, in the voice that tells you, don't trust them. Or worse, don't trust yourself. You start to feel like two people. The one who's holding it all together, and the one inside who's quietly falling apart. But real healing doesn't come from becoming flawless. It comes from becoming whole. From letting the parts you've disowned come back to the table. The angry part, the scared part, the wounded part. Because those are still you. They're just the parts that learned how to survive in a world that didn't know how to care for your full self. True strength isn't being unshakable. It's being honest. It's saying, I'm still healing. I still carry things. I still feel the weight of what happened, even if I've learned how to walk with it. And in that honesty, something begins to soften. You stop performing your piece and start living it. You stop needing to prove you're okay and begin honoring where you're still not. Because the goal was never to become perfect. The goal was to come home, to all of you, even the parts you thought you had to hide to be loved. Healing isn't a finish line. It's not a perfect day where the pain never touches you again. It's not waking up one morning and realizing you're finally over it. It's quieter than that. It's saying no without guilt for the first time. It's recognizing a red flag and walking away without needing a reason big enough to justify it. It's being able to sit with your sadness without rushing to escape it, Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are. Not who you were trained to be, not who the world expected you to be, but you, whole and aware, no longer fractured by the fear of being too much. And it's a hard road, because to come home to yourself, you have to leave behind the version of you that survived by being small. You have to say goodbye to the performance, to the mask, to the silence that protected you, but also imprisoned you. But when you do, something remarkable happens. You stop waiting for someone else to come save you. You stop begging for the kind of love that costs your voice. You stop shrinking so others can stay comfortable. And instead, you sit down in your own life. Fully. Finally. You don't erase your pain. You carry it. But gently now. With understanding. With grace. You remember the child who waited. The soul who ached. The self you silenced so others wouldn't walk away. And you welcome them back. Not with judgment, but with tenderness. Because now, you were never too much. You were never broken. You were just becoming. And this quiet, hard-earned return to your own soul, this is what coming home looks like. So if you're still walking that road, if you're still learning to hold your truth without apology, to stay soft in a world that told you to harden, welcome back. You made it through, not perfect, but present, and finally free.